Hello, students. We're going to do the second part of the energy lecture. In this, it's titled "Alternative Energy Resources" or "Alternate Energy Resources." That's because historically, these were thought of as sort of non-mainstream, non-mainline energy resources. This is a list that we're going to go through. I just have the list here so that as you go back through and study, it'll kind of help separate out and differentiate the different things. And again, I'm going to go through this pretty quick, so if you need to pause to take notes, please do so. So anyhow, let's go ahead and move forward. First on the list is nuclear. Yes, it's been around for a while, and it is one that's popular. As far as your notes, the part you need to know is this part right here about fission, which is our current technology, and it's where the atom is split. Now, you don't have to know all this. You don't have to know nuclear science. I just have this on here to let you know that what happens is extra neutrons are added to basically an unstable uranium atom that then splits and it gives off enormous amounts of energy, and that creates a chain reaction. So anyhow, our technology that we use is where the atom is split, and it's called fission. This is really all you need to know for the test. Now, there are some problems with it. Very long half-life. That is, the way you describe the radioactivity of something, you might say, well, its half-life is, 4 million years, which means 4 million years from now, it'll have half the radioactivity that it does right now. And so it means a lot of this stuff has a very long half-life. And some of it's thousands of years. Some of it is even in millions of years. And so that means waste is an issue, storing that waste. And then finally, add this to your notes. This is important too. This idea that uranium is non-renewable. Uranium is non-renewable because once we split that atom, it's no longer uranium. And so it is, in a sense, burned up or used up. So uranium is non-renewable. The way it basically works, and you don't have to take any notes from this. This is just simply to help you understand it. This is the reactor. And remember I said it gave off enormous amounts of heat. Well, in that reactor, they're going to have heavy water. And that heavy water gets heated, and then as it's heated, it heats normal water to create steam. And remember before when we talked about that coal-fired plant, how that you use steam to run the generator, and that's how you generate electricity. Well, the nuclear power plant is essentially the same. What you do is you basically are, quote, burning up the uranium in the reactor and generating enormous amounts of heat to boil water to make steam to run the turbine. Again, nuclear power plants will have these cooling towers. We've seen these before, and you might see these kind of cooling towers at coal-fired plants, nuclear plants. And that water that's been used to make steam, you've got to cool it before you put it back out the river. But you can tell that this is a nuclear power plant by this building shape. That's a containment building. It has a very distinct shape. If you were to go inside, you would see, and again, you'll have to take notes from it, the infamous color giving off from it and the glow. These are fuel rods that they raise and lower. You can see here where they're working within the chamber. And as they raise the control rods out, it allows the reaction to take place. Now, the most devastating nuclear accident that we've had in the world was Chernobyl. You don't have to have this in your notes, but I think it's interesting to highlight. There, system uses what's called a dry pile. They don't submerge it in water. And in Chernobyl, what they were doing is they were running a test, and it got away from them. It superheated and then basically exploded. And when it did, it blew out the roof of the containment building, and then actually radioactive material was spread all over the world. And you can see down into the reactor area, all of that was destroyed whenever the reactor exploded. And of course, that facility was mothballed. I mean, that whole area around Chernobyl had to be evacuated. And so it's basically become a ghost town. One of the more recent nuclear accidents was in Fukushima. What happened here was, and again, you don't have to have notes on this, but just sort of tell you a little bit about it. They had a tsunami, so they had this great wave that came up and over the plant, and it shut down the control systems at the plant. And what happened was then the cooling systems shut down, and the reactor basically melted down. Well, the good thing about this design, which is an American design, yes, it melted and it was captured, though, within the containment vessel. And while, yes, nuclear material did escape, it was not to the same extent as they had at Chernobyl. Now, when we talk about nuclear, a potentially safe alternative is fusion. Now, you don't have to write all these notes. This is just add-on. But when we talk about fusion reactions, we're talking about the same thing that happens on the sun. You're creating a heavy element from light elements, because in the sun what happens is there's a reaction where hydrogen is fused and it creates helium, and it gives off enormous amounts of energy. You can use deuterium and tritium, which are variants on hydrogen. It's abundant, it's cheap, it's found in ocean water. The problem is that deuterium tritium plasma, which is what you have to create to get this reaction going, has to be heated to over 100 million degrees centigrade. And it has to be held away from the container wall. They use these magnetic fields to do this, otherwise it would disintegrate the wall. Currently, it's not feasible as an energy source. We can carry out fusion reactions, but it has the potential to be safe and clean because you're not using radioactive material. Deuterium and tritium is pretty stable, pretty safe. And the reaction, if it won't get away from you, because what happens is if it does, it cools off and just basically shuts down. So it's ideally much safer. Now, we have carried out reactions before. They typically look like this. This is a hydrogen bomb going off, which is a bomb that uses atom bombs as the trigger to create this huge thermonuclear reaction. So enormous amounts of energy are released, and these bombs are very devastating. This is a fusion reactor. And again, the difference between fusion and fission. Fission, you're separating the atom. Fusion, you're jamming them together. This is the reactor. This is actually a cross section. It's got a circular donut, as they call it, and these panels create a magnetic field to keep the material away from the walls. Now, throughout the world, there are other types of alternative energy. So, for example, hydro, tidal, and wave power. The U.S. leads the world in hydroelectric power. It's actually 10% of our electricity. Now, the thing about hydroelectric or tidal or wave power is that it has limited sites for development. You've got to have basically running water and a good steady source of it. So without that, you're not going to have the site to be able to generate electricity. And there are environmental concerns. When you build a dam, you change the habitat, you change the function of the river. But some of the more unusual ones are like this storage plant that's at Raccoon Mountain. This is just outside of Chattanooga. Here they let the water through this pipe, runs through a generator out into the Tennessee River, and generates electricity. Here you can see a cross section of a hydroelectric dam. So the dam backs the water up and creates sort of this head pressure. The water goes through a pipe called a penstock, spins a turbine, which spins a generator, which makes electricity. Here you can see, and again, you don't have to take any notes from this. You can see the generator as the water flows through, it spins this turbine, which looks kind of like a prop off a boat. And as it spins the generator to make electricity. In Tennessee, obviously, we have several of these. This is Kentucky Lake, but these dams generate a lot of electricity. And again, you don't have to take notes on this. The largest one in the world is in China. It's called the Three Gorges Dam, and it's about a mile across. The thing is huge. Now, I mentioned tidal power. The way that works is that you have sort of like a dam that as the tide comes, well, I'll use down here, as the tide comes in, water flows in, flows across a generator or across a turbine. And then as the tide flows out, it goes the other way, but it'll still generate electricity. So you have this thing like a dam, but as the tide goes in and out, it generates electricity. Next up is photovoltaic or PV or solar energy. Currently, it is an expensive way to make electricity. The panels are expensive, so energy production currently is about 2 to 4 times mainstream sources. So you see interest in photovoltaic, but it's still pretty expensive to do. Some states, and Tennessee is one, that allows private photovoltaic or solar producers to connect to the energy grid and sell off their excess. So the panels make electricity when the sun's shining, and so if you make extra, you can actually sell it to TVA. Now, this is an important point. Photovoltaic facility, the construction is very expensive. So the front end is expensive, but there are few moving parts, so upkeep is minimal. So again, the construction is expensive. It's expensive on the front end. There are few moving parts, so upkeep is nominal or inexpensive. There's not an ongoing expense. Now, you don't have to take any notes from this. This is just showing you a map of places in the U.S. where solar is viable. And quite frankly, much of the lower 48 is viable for energy production, especially you get out into the Southwest. Photovoltaic is very effective in that region. So even where we are in Tennessee, photovoltaic is not a bad option, other than the fact that the panels are expensive. Some areas, this is out in the Southwest, they have these solar farms, and you can actually see them from the air. If you fly into like Las Vegas, you can really see several of these out in the desert. Now, some places in the world, what they do is they're reflecting the solar energy. Here, they're actually reflecting it to a spot up in the sky. They're getting ready. The actual tower is here. They'll focus all that light onto the other side of this tower where it's got a boiler, and that will superheat that water and boil it to make steam. So once again, make steam, turn a generator, make electricity. Wind. There's been a lot of interest in wind in the last few years. Now, it like solar, now I didn't talk about this because I was going to talk about this now, but solar power and wind power, the problem is it has limited storage capacity. That is, when the wind's blowing, when the sun's shining, you have electricity. When the sun's not shining, when the wind's not blowing, you don't. So that is a serious problem with wind and solar. So when the wind's blowing, you got electricity. When the wind's not blowing, you don't have electricity. One of the things they have looked at is storage, direct current storage batteries, and these are being researched. They use these on submarines. Electric cars use these. So having something in your home where you would store up the electricity and then use it, like at night, things like that, the battery would store the electricity and then have it available when you need it. Buffalo Mountain here in Tennessee was the first wind farm here in the southeast, so it was the very first one. Again, the way wind works is it spins this rotor or blade, and it spins a generator, which generates electricity, just like all other electric production. Now, this is a map of where wind production can be. You can see the places that are like purple, red, and blue are really, really good. Notice where we are here in Tennessee, no, not so good. And that's not because we don't have wind. It's just not steady. We don't have very many wind days, so it's not very effective. Now, on the coast where you have steady sea and land breezes, obviously this is good. But you get inland here and it's not all that great. Next up is what's called geothermal energy, and that's where we use steam from a geyser or a volcanically active aquifer. Basically, you've got underground, you have lava that you can either, water is naturally going into it, or you can inject water, and that lava then superheats that water, turns it into steam. You capture that steam and run it through a turbine, and again generate electricity just like everything else. There are a number of places in the United States that have a lot of potential for geothermal. It is cheap, it is clean, but very limited in what we can do. The minerals from it are very corrosive on your equipment. If you go, for example, into this region of Wyoming, where Yellowstone is located, you'll see a lot of geothermal features like the geysers and the mud pots and all that. And one of the things you'll notice is the sulfur smell. Well, that sulfur can create sulfuric acid, which obviously is going to be very tough on your equipment. This plant right here is in Iceland, and in fact, they have managed to build enough plants. I think all of their electricity, if not most all of their electricity, comes from geothermal production. But again, the way it works is there's either water already there that's coming up as steam, or you inject water in the ground that gets boiled by the magma, generates steam, run it through the power plant, make electricity. Now, another sort of alternative is methane. Methane is created, it's a gas byproduct of anaerobic bacteria. Now, anaerobic bacteria are bacteria that do not breathe air. And so whenever you have like let's say, for example, a pile of leaves that are underwater, if you've ever noticed, you can poke at it and bubbles will come up. Well, those bubbles will contain methane. Gas production in animals, you and I, or cattle, we have anaerobic bacteria that live in our bodies, and we actually will produce methane gas. But gas product of anaerobic bacteria and the decomposition of organic waste. So things like livestock waste, human waste, garbage can create that. In this example, show you a landfill. It's not uncommon where you bury that you will have methane gas produced, and you can actually collect that off, burn it, and again, just like in this, instead of having oil, you use that methane gas, run a generator, run a turbine, run a generator, make electricity. Now, another, quote, alternative is biomass. Biomass is fuel made from living or was living material. One example is ethanol. Ethanol is a form of alcohol that's made from corn and sugarcane. Here in the U.S., we've been good at making alcohol from corn for quite some time. We actually have a number of ethanol plants. We've got one over toward the Mississippi here in Tennessee. When you go buy gasoline, you can buy, typically, when we go to the pump, we're buying what's called E10. It has 10% of ethanol in it, and it's blended with the gasoline, and that's typically what we use today. Now, if you have a car that's got a yellow gas cap, it means that your car can burn what's called E85, which is 85% ethanol. And you can't put that in every vehicle. Like in my old pickup, if you put this, it won't run because it doesn't have enough energy and it doesn't run well. And like some people try to buy even ethanol-free gas for their lawnmowers and things like that. So E85 is out there. I talked about this before. Ethanol is not as energy rich as gasoline. That's one reason why it won't run in older vehicles. If you had a gallon of ethanol and a gallon of gasoline, that ethanol only has 75% of the energy in it that gas has. So it's quite a bit less. Cellulosic ethanol can be made from things like switchgrass or short rotation trees that you just grow for a very short time. Second form of biomass is biodiesel. Now, unlike ethanol, biodiesel actually has fairly similar energy profile to regular diesel. It can replace diesel. It's made by things like soybeans or animal fat. There's actually a algae that produces oil that can make biodiesel, and they think that a future source of biodiesel may be algae production. So again, a lot of corn goes into the production of ethanol, so can make a liquid fuel from it. Other parts of the world, they use sugarcane. Sugarcane is actually pretty good. It's got a higher density of carbohydrate, so it's good at making it. Soybeans, we use soybeans to make biodiesel. And then here's one of those systems where they're growing that algae to generate that algae oil to make biodiesel. Third thing with biomass is just simply burn it. You can burn wood, you can burn switchgrass, and in fact, it's probably the most efficient thing that you can do. TVA, I've mentioned this before, they will mix wood chips in with their coal-fired plant, and so they, as they describe it, cogen electricity, and so they make electricity from burning wood. It's actually considered to be carbon neutral because whenever you burn that wood, yes, it releases carbon, but when you grow that wood, it ties carbon up. So in theory, it's a carbon neutral. Same with switchgrass. And so again, we burn it, use that heat to make steam to turn the turbine. And then our last alternative energy is fuel cells. This is actually a pretty exotic system. It was developed by NASA to solve a problem they had in the space program. What it will do is it will convert hydrogen to electricity with water as the byproduct. In NASA, they had this problem where they needed to cut down on weight. Well, batteries are very heavy, and so was water. Well, somebody figured out that with a fuel cell, you add hydrogen to it, and they carry a great deal of hydrogen as a fuel for the rockets on the spacecraft. Run the hydrogen through it, and it will react with oxygen, and it'll make water. And so they solved two problems. They could make their water in space with the fuel cell and then generate electricity as well. So there have been fuel cells for cars. Honda famously made one a few years ago. And as you drive down the road, you basically have water coming out of the tailpipe. And so you can generate electricity with a fuel cell. Now, the reason you don't see very many of these on the road, they're very, very expensive to produce. So that's kind of been a limiting factor. But quite frankly, I expect this to be one of the technologies that you see a lot of in the future. All right, that ends our lecture on fuels, and we talked about fuel cells, and we talked about alternative energy. This ends that lecture. If you have any questions about anything on it, please don't hesitate to email me, reach out to me. This is Dr. Philip Smart, and I will be in touch.